Hello and welcome to the in-depth series section of Drishti IAS. I am Aisha Singh, and in today's video we will be discussing a topic which is very much in news, and that is what is Hindutva rate of GDP growth. And remember the word Hindutva, because what you always see in news is what is Hindu rate of GDP growth. So Hindu rate of GDP growth is different from Hindutva rate of GDP growth. The Hindutva rate of GDP growth is a term which, or a phrase which has recently been coined. So first of all, about the timeline, we'll be looking at the news, then knowing about the Hindutva rate of GDP growth, then what is Hindu rate of growth, about its feature, and in the end prelims MCQ. Topic is of relevance from General Studies paper 3, that is economy. So terms can be asked. Hindu rate of growth remains in news, and with respect to this, the new term has been coined. So before starting, Drishti IAS is coming up with UPSC foundation courses in the offline format. So in Jaipur, it is starting on 19th of December, then Karol Bagh 26th of December, Prayagraj 27th December, Lucknow is also 27th December. So any of you who wants to get a holistic preparation for both prelims plus mains can go for it. And if you are not able to attend the offline classes, you can also go for the online classes. So the news talks about what is Hindutva rate of GDP growth, how it compares with Hindu rate. So there is difference, Hindu rate of growth, Hindutva rate of growth. Before going forward, let us first understand what is GDP, the gross domestic product. As the name itself is telling, domestic and then product. Domestic means something which is prepared domestically, it means something which is prepared inside the house. So if we talk about India, then India's GDP can be considered the value of final goods and services produced within a year in the or within the boundary or territory of India. So GDP of India can be considered as something, the final value, final is an important word, the end products. So the final value of goods and services produced within the territory of India in a year, within a year. So that is considered as the GDP of India. So when we talk about GDP of India, it means we are saying that whatever is being produced within the territory of India, the final products, that is what we consider the GDP. So if the growth of GDP rate is high, it means we are doing well, we are producing more. If the GDP growth is going down, it means we are producing less. So that is why GDP growth is considered to be important, because it shows that how well the economy is doing, or whether the economy is growing or not, whether the economy is expansionary or the economy is contractionary. So having a good and a positive and a high GDP growth rate is important. And many a times what you hear in news is also about that the GDP of this country is doing well, while the GDP growth of this country is doing very fine. So if we talk about from country perspective, then we always get to hear that China and India's GDP are two of the fastest growing GDPs, and now that China is going through a slowdown, while India's GDP is nowadays also doing good. And according to the IMF also, we are one of the fastest growing economy, and over a period of time we are doing really well. So this projection of high GDP growth rate is what projects to the world that India on the global stage is performing really well and is growing. So what has happened recently is that in the recent parliamentary debate which was going on, MP Sudhanshu Trivedi has coined the phrase Hindutva rate of GDP growth. I am again telling you, this is not Hindu rate of GDP growth, this is Hindutva rate of GDP growth. So the term has been recently, or the phrase has been recently coined. And it has been said that the Hindutva rate of GDP growth is pegged at around 8%. So when we are talking about from India's perspective and we are saying that the GDP growth is around 8%, what are we talking about, or what are we projecting? We are projecting that the economy is doing well, that the economy is growing, that the production is happening, and it is visible because the GDP growth rate is around 8%. It means that the Hindutva rate of GDP growth, according to Mr. Sudhanshu Trivedi, who is an MP, he talks about that Hindutva rate of GDP growth has happened in the recent past, that is in around a decade, that India as an economy is growing, is moving forward as compared to other countries. It is doing really well, and as compared to other countries it is growing at a faster pace, which in earlier time, or at the time of, you can say, the economic reforms, or after India got independence, it was not happening. But as of now, in the last 1 decade, India has performed really well as an economy, and the GDP growth rate has been doing really well as compared to other economies also. And India is, as of now, the 5th largest economy. We have moved forward of UK, and we are in line to pass over the economy of Germany and Japan also. And in the coming few years, we will be becoming the 3rd largest economy of the world after the United States of America and China. So this shows that in the last 1 decade, India as an economy has really flourished. So we have seen a growth. The GDP growth is what is responsible for it. And this growth of GDP has been termed as the Hindutva rate of GDP growth. So India's annual GDP growth rate this year was much faster as that of US, UK, European countries and Japan also. And why is it that it is different from the Hindu growth rate? Is because the Hindu growth rate refers to the low growth rate, while the Hindutva rate of GDP growth refers to the high growth rate. So there is a difference. Hindu growth rate, low growth rate; Hindutva growth rate, high growth rate. So Hindu growth rate, which is considered to be the low growth rate, was happening at a time of 1970s and 1980s. So that was the time when India's GDP was not growing at a very faster pace. And Hindutva growth rate is present rate, where nowadays the economy, the Indian economy, or the GDP growth rate is happening at a rate of 7+%, and it has been projected that it will move also with 6+ or 7+% rate. Now let's talk about the Hindu rate of growth. So I hope you are comfortable with Hindutva rate of growth. Now let's talk about Hindu rate of growth. So Hindu rate of growth, it is described as the slow growth rate. Slow growth rate. It has been said that when economy grows at a very slow pace, when the GDP of a country grows at a very slow pace, then it is regarded as the Hindu rate of growth. So it is described as the slow growth rate of the Indian economy, and this was between the year 1950s and 1980s, when Indian economy was growing at a speed of 3.5% to 4%, and the GDP was not performing well. Production was not happening, export was not happening. So there were few of the features and few of the components of the economy, when integrated together, was not able to perform well. And it was coined by Indian economist Raj Krishna during the time of 1970s. So the term Hindu growth rate has been coined by Indian economist Raj Krishna. And the Indian economy grew at an average rate of around 3.5 to 4%. So basically it means the slow growth rate, while on the other hand Hindutva growth rate means fast growth rate. Then it is much lower than other developing countries like South Korea, Taiwan and Hong Kong. While during the time of 1950s to 1980s, we could consider that we were not growing at a pace while all other developing countries were moving at a very faster pace. So we were not doing well. While in today's scenario, in the current scenario, if we will see, we are moving forward and we are moving faster in terms of GDP growth rate as compared to the other developing economies. So there are contradictory scenarios. 1950s to 1980s we were moving slow, while in the last one decade we are moving fast, and it has been projected also with other international organizations like the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. All other rating agencies also have projected that India will be moving forward with 6+% of GDP growth rate. Now few of the features of Hindu growth rate, that why India's growth was slow during the time of 1950s to 1980s. First of all is low GDP growth rate, and the reasons for the low GDP growth rate were many, and some of them were slow industrialization. So at that point of time, India was not a country which was manufacturing much, and even the capital formation was not there. So industrialization could not happen at that point of time. And India as a country lagged during the initial stages of the independence to move forward into the respect of industrialization. Second, stagnant agriculture. So as a country, if we will see, then India is a country which is agricultural dependent country, and majority of the population is also employed in the agriculture sector. So when we talk about population and then employed population, then majority of the population, you can say more than around 35 to 40% of India's population is engaged in agriculture. But at that point of time, even the agriculture became stagnant. It was not generating employment. It was not generating much profits. So that also contributed to the slow growth rate of India. Then lack of foreign investment. Investment in the initial stages was not there. It started to come after 1991. That is when the economic reforms took place. That is the globalization, liberalization and privatization of the economy started to happen. Other countries took notice of India, and India opened its own market and were ready to accept the foreign investment, and that is when after 1991 that the foreign investments came. But before that, during the time of 1950s, 60s, 70s and 80s, it was a time when we as a nation were not doing well. We lagged on the capital formation. There was no investment, and even the public sector was not there and was not doing very well. There was license Raj. Private sector was regulated at a very high level, and the private sector could not work on its own. So because of the license Raj, also the private sectors were regulated in such a high intensity that they could not work properly. So foreign investments could not be raised, and license Raj led to low private investments, because in every single thing there was so much of regulation, and the permissions needs to be taken, licenses needs to be taken, private sector could not enter into much respect. So there was so much of regulation that the private sector and the private companies were working at a very low pace. So these are few of the features of Hindu growth rate, that why the low growth rate happened. Now in the end, a prelims MCQ, and you people need to tell me the answer in the comment section. I framed the question in a way that is being asked by UPSC, as it is fond of asking questions with regard to terms. So the Hindu rate of growth. The Hindu rate of growth is associated with slow growth rate of agriculture, slow growth rate of Indian economy, slow growth rate of industrialization, or all of the above. So see the video, understand it, and give me the answer in the comment section. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Till we meet next time, keep reading and keep writing.